I want to bring Trey Reeder up and also Paul Flannery up at the same time. We just have a legislative update, and Trey's going to bring us up to speed. Trey Howard S. Reeder III, a.k.a. Trey. We know Howard for 14 we know Steele. Originally heading up the Marine Clearance Department, Trey provides owners and captains with required documentation and interpretation of federal regulations and so on and so forth, imports boats. And Paul Flannery is the president. Staley Weidman had to drop off, and that's why Paul's here to bring us up to speed on where we are with H.R. 2435. Right.
Well, I don't know, is this on? Yeah, perfect, I can hear myself. Well, Trey Reeder here to talk about mostly the EPA because it's become an immediate problem for boats, but I want to talk about the cruising permit situation and see if let you know that there's not been a ton of movement. If the boat's still for sale or for charter online, most of the ports in South Florida are still looking at it and saying, no cruising permit. A little movement, and not all the ports, mostly here in Fort Lauderdale. If you can get the owner to create a small itinerary, Customs will issue a cruising permit for a specific trip. And some of them are fairly long, up to 4 months even. We've been doing, a lot of these guys want to use their boats in the Northeast in the summer, and Customs is still, if we give them a cruising permit, get them a cruising permit for that 4 months, they're happy. Customs will do it though. If we can get an owner kind of given some start and end dates as to when the private use will be, over, and that's it. So. Ourselves, we tried to do it kind of as a group. There was a fairly large group, and I know Mike was just up here, was part of that group, trying to get some answers out of Customs on a general basis. And when you do these general things, Customs doesn't change very well. So we're going to try to go back after it just on a single individual boat with probably 2 or 3 individual boats with specific scenarios that are very common these days. Like a U.S. built boat with a U.S. owner that just happens to be registered in the Marshall Islands. He wants to still use his boat while it's here. Even some of these boats that have paid their import taxes and their sales tax in the state of Florida, Customs saying, you can't use your boat. So those are the kind of things we're going to go on specific boats that we know have those scenarios and ask a specific general question. A lot of times that gets moved a lot quicker. So hopefully something will happen with that. But all in all, we're still kind of par for the course. If you're for sale, if you're for charter, and mostly online, Customs, for the most part, will deny it unless you have a specific trip that you're going to do. But to get, I guess, to the EPA stuff, which I don't know if that's up here yet. There we go. There's my little thing. But it's basically, how is this affecting brokers and the imports of these boats, and kind of how it all came about. But as everyone knows, at least as of right now, for the most part, import duty has to be paid to offer your boat for sale in the United States if it's not a not a U.S. manufactured boat. And there's a new customs system out there. It's called ACE, and it's the Automated Commercial Environment, and that's where all entries get filed now. And within that, there's something called the PGA, which is a partner government agency, which is every acronym of government you can think of, from FDA, USDA, Fish and Wildlife, and EPA is one of them. And when you go to import a boat these days, the second you put in the tariff number that is a yacht, EPA pops right up on the screen. You can't really get past that until you provide the information that is needed. But that's now an immediate enforcement by EPA of a requirement on a boat to be imported into the U.S. So there's really no way around it. And we've had a few scenarios lately in which brokers have had boats come in and I've promised clients that they can bring them in and offer them for sale, and we can broaden the market by importing it here, so bring it up from the Caribbean or something like that, and the boats have come in, and now, the broker has to tell them, wait a second, I can't, boats, we'll tell them, and it's sad to do it, but your boat's unimportable, I can't import it. So now you're back to telling this guy, you just brought his boat all the way up here, and you're going to market it, and now you've closed that market down again because it's not importable, so it has to be listed not for sale to U.S. residents again. So that's kind of one of the things we've seen. I've seen 3 or 4 different scenarios now. I mean, another one was a buyer that actually, broker found a great deal over in Europe, and the guy was going to bring it here and fly the Stars and Stripes. And when it got here, all his plans had to change because ultimately it was a non-compliant boat. It had to be foreign flagged and be on cruising permits, which is what the previous owner didn't want to have to do. The buyer didn't want to have to do because their previous boat was a foreign flag boat, and they were kind of done with that. Part of the ownership. So going from there, that's kind of how it affects sellers and buyers right now. But it is, when I say impossible to get an entry through with customs, yeah, I mean, you're basically filing an entry with customs and EPA. You know, you file it, customs can release an entry, but it's not fully released until you get a release from the EPA, and vice versa. So that's kind of our big thing that we've had these days is, I mean, just, and I'd say a pitfall that brokers can fall into is bringing these boats in without knowing, you know, if the boat that they're bringing in can comply and will, you know, be good for the use of the, you know, with the intended use by the owner. It's kind of, I don't know, let's see. To import a boat these days, there's a list of items you have to have. One is a copy of the registration, a bill of sale, something that shows the ownership of the boat. A valuation. With a U.S. boat, it can be done by a yacht broker, but customs really is a transactional value is what they're looking for. So if it's a recent purchase, we can use that value to import these boats. And if not, you have to have a marine surveyor place a valuation on it. They don't want anyone who's, you know, we don't want us making up our own value for this, I guess assuming we'll go low. And then the last thing is the EPA for, you know, information for the engines and the generators as well, which we've seen as well where a generator wasn't compliant but the engines were. So we've had some boats that we couldn't import for that reason as well, and that really seems to be the biggest wrench I've seen. It's whether it's a boat wants to be listed, a boat wants to be sold. I mean, some of the deals that are 2-3 days away from closing, they'll bring a boat over here and it's going to close on Wednesday. The boat shows up here on Monday and they say, all right, we're going to pay the duty now so we can continue on with the closing. Whole deal blows up. So the EPA right now is really, I would say, the biggest problem in importing a boat and for brokers. So, but this is the information that's required on an engine that has to be EPA compliant. The information that EPA is requesting is the maker manufacturer, the model year of the boat, and then, or model year of the engines. And some engines, this is easy to get, some it's not, is the month and year of the manufacturer of each of the engines and generators in the boat. The serial numbers are usually pretty easy. And the certification date of that engine is also another one that's a little harder to find. Some manufacturers actually put it on the engines, a lot of them don't. We spend hours searching for this stuff, trying to help the importers out. And we're getting a little better at it these days. And then the seventh thing is called an engine family name, which I put an example up there. It's a 12-digit or a 12-character code, basically, that is tied directly to that specific engine model. And that's, you know, that's an example I put up of a Yanmar that we did. Let's see here. So there are some engines that don't need to be, don't need to have that. Typically, of the diesel engines these days, it seems to be right around 2005 is when you really got to start looking and making sure that it is, because anything really before that was, the standard wasn't there with the EPA yet. So it was before the standard started to apply, so those engines don't need to be certified. And you just need the make, model. You do need the year, manufacturer, and typically the month as well, which is a little harder to get, especially on some of the older motors. We haven't encountered anyone who can't get the serial numbers, but we have had a few close calls where the engines have been painted 3 or 4 times over the years and there's just no identifying marks. And in those cases, I would think it'd be almost impossible also to file the import because you can't get past EPA until you give them that information. And this, so let's see. This is when did EPA kind of start for your spark gas engines? It was 1998, and then 1999 is when it started for diesels, depending on size. So yeah, the outboard engines, 1998. If you're selling a boat, a whaler or whatever it is that has outboards on it, if you're trying to re-import a boat with outboards, 1998, they're gonna have to be able to provide all the information with EPA. The jet skis and watercraft, I don't know how much of that's really getting imported these days, but that was in 99. It's kind of getting in the weeds a bit, but the inboards and stern drives, 2010 for gas motors. So all your 454s and your 6-liter GMs and all that stuff. But there is no minimum size or horsepower or displacement or anything for gas engines. But diesel gets a little bit different. everything goes by size. But the first one, 1999 for diesel, and that was typically in the smaller boats, smaller engine size as well. The first one is the 19 kilowatts to 37 kilowatts, your 25 to 50 horsepower range. And that's the one that started in 1999. And then in 2000, just the even smaller engines, which you don't see a lot of, I would assume these days, the 25 horsepower and less, became into effect. And at least for me, I see it a lot of times in these sailboats and catamarans that we're importing these days. And this for the more common diesels, pretty much all of them at this point. This is where displacement really does become a factor and needing to know if your engine is compliant or not. And say in 2004, commercial purposes, commercial registered, that's when those engines need to be in compliance. Which also, if some of these bigger yachts that flip commercial and private, depending on where they're at, can make a difference. So we're kind of looking into that a little bit to see how much enforcement we've seen and want to get a little more clarification on that. But so these big yachts that come in as commercial, if they get stopped, are they going to be, they're going to have to come into this 2004 year, because in the pleasure side, it's 2006. So there's a 2-year discrepancy between those two, whether you're commercial or use or private. But this, I don't know, you can kind of see it all right here. I don't know, it's, like I said, it's numbers. So it's not the most interesting thing. But yeah, I would say around that 2005 for the majority of the pleasure vessels. If you see 2004, 2005, that's when you want to start looking and make sure everything on that boat is EPA compliant if you're planning on bringing it in here and importing it and paying the duty and all that. Because if not, like I said, it could be catastrophic to a deal or to a listing if you can't actually import it. And even going with the free trade zone thing, you may get a guy that wants to have his boat in the FTZ, and then all of a sudden, when he wants to bring it out, he buys, bring an American in, and that's great, and he decides to buy the boat. Maybe it's not a boat that can be imported after the fact, so it have to be exported. This is just more of those numbers. I don't know if they're really, if they're worth jotting down. If not, you can always Google the there's a thing called the 3520-21, which is the EPA form, and it does have all those little numbers there to kind of pick through. And this is what an EPA certificate of conformity has. If you can get that for the engines in the boat, you're good to go. That's exactly what the EPA wants these engines to have. This is what should be on these engines. All the engines that are EPA compliant are supposed to be marked with a sticker or a plate. Here's one for a Yanmar, and it's got the engine family and the model. Here's another one for Volvo. It's got the year that it's built, that engine family, and a lot of the information that is needed to do this. So a lot of times, if you get someone to go in an engine room, you'll get what you need. There's an MTU, kind of the same deal. Here's another one from MAN Diesel, and they all have that same information as required by the EPA. So I highly suggest if you do have surveyors out there doing it, try to ask them to do it, because if not, ultimately you'll be crawling around in the bilge or engine room trying to take that picture. I know I've done it several times to get a boat imported for people. So that's kind of that for the EPA right now. You want to just make sure that if you are intending on importing a boat, that before you have it sent all the way to the U.S. to do that, or tell a potential buyer or seller that you can list his boat, or he can buy a boat and flag it a certain way, make sure that boat is compliant with the EPA, because like I said, it could and has already, at least from what we've seen, blown up some deals, had some brokers look bad, things like that. So I guess we'll talk about the
we got all kinds of other
HR.
stuff to talk about.
Yeah, there's all kinds
Awesome.
of stuff. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Trey. Thank you for an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
And actually, thank you for all the wonderful presentations today. We had a pretty action-packed day. I've had the pleasure of attending a lot of these seminars, organized a couple of them, and I got to tell you, Jeff and your group did a spectacular job today of assembling really wonderful information with really wonderful presenters. So I think we all got a lot to take away from today. With regard to a legislative update for the association, one of the big agenda items for us has been deferred importation. A group of us went up to Washington, D.C. We were joined this year by Gigi Garcia and Jenny Wicker, Staley Weidman, Grant Henderson, myself, Cindy, and David Moss. And David Moss went with us. Oh, and Bob Dennison, that's right, yeah. Poor Bob, he's off gallivanting around France today. He couldn't make it with us today. But somebody's got to do the dirty work, right? So we went to DC, as we've done several times, and our legislative agenda, as I said, is deferred importation. Most of y'all are familiar with it. What we're trying to do is to remove not available for sale to U.S. residents while in U.S. waters, so that foreign flag vessels can come in, be offered for sale to the most robust yacht market in the world. The 114th Congress expired. Our bill, H.R. 4065, of course, sundowned with the expiration of that Congress. We now have the 115th Congress in place. We have a new number for our bill. It's the same bill, but the new number is H.R. 2369. We have 15 sponsors so far. It's being championed by Lois Frankel and Ted Yoho, which is bipartisan support, and it was very interesting as we walked around Washington and spoke with different Congress people and staffers, the dichotomy represented by the political views of Lois Frankel and Ted Yoho really raised a lot of eyebrows. So what was really great about it was that people were able to see that bipartisan support like this was so wide-ranging that this is really good stuff. This isn't some sort of legislation that we're trying to sneak through, or like, oh, there's going to be a lot of controversy about this. With this kind of wide support, they recognize that it's just good for business. It makes a lot of sense. The support that we got from Jenny and Gigi to come up this year, I think, was really special to show that some of our members would take their time and come and do that. You know, we don't have the ability to invite 200 people up there, but to have the support of our members really speaks volumes to the legislators when we're in DC. So where we are with it right now is we have 15 supporters. We spent a lot of our effort this year meeting people that are members of the Coastal Congress. What do they call them? Not Coastal Congress, but Coastal Caucus, thank you. The Coastal Caucus, and that's representatives from Maryland and Oregon and Washington and South Carolina, North Carolina, of course Florida. You know, that's home turf for us, so we have good support there. We have the 15 supporters right now. We're looking for more, and we feel comfortable that we'll get significantly more supporters. And what that does is it gives us a bill that it can't stand on its own, unfortunately. It's not a big enough piece of legislation. But what it can do is be attached to other legislation that we expect would be passed. One of the things that makes a lot of sense for it to be attached to would be tax reform. The climate up there is such that they feel like tax reform is something that is going to move through. They don't know if it's going to move through in one big lump, if it's going to move through in 2 pieces or in 3 pieces. But what we do know is that if they decide to break tax reform into a few pieces, they'll attach our bill to whichever piece of that legislation they feel is going to ease through most easily. So we're very, very hopeful that we'll see deferred importation become law this year. Fingers crossed. We've put a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort into removing a barrier to commerce. And one of the things that our association has done just in the time that I noticed that I've been on the board, is we started out as an association whose mission was to promote professionalism and cooperation amongst the yacht brokerage community. And what we've come to learn is that we have the opportunity to remove barriers to commerce for our industry. So that's what we try to do with our legislative efforts like this. The tax cap was a great example of that. We feel like that was a pretty good thing. So did 15 other states, thought it was a pretty good thing, so they've copied that. Or in some way, shape, or form, they've decided to follow along with tax reforms for their states. So those are some of the things that we try to do today as your association. Our membership today is up to 1,350, almost 1,400 members. It's grown pretty significantly in the last several years. As y'all know, when I became president a year and a half ago, we were the Florida Yacht Brokers Association. In fact, some of our presenters think we still are the Florida Yacht Brokers Association, but we talked about that. Anyway, we met with YABA, actually, And our executive committee met with their executive committee and had a real eye-opening experience in that we learned that outside of the state of Florida, they viewed FEBA as very much of an exclusionist or kind of a segregationist group, in that they feel like we wanted to keep the business in Florida just for ourselves and keep everybody out. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. We want to enhance the opportunity to do business here. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our listing clients to offer their products, their products that we represent, out to the widest audience possible. So when we learned that from YABA, that was when we made the decision to go to be IYBA, and last year at the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show, we made that announcement. We did a soft move at the Monaco Yacht Show last year with the help of Bob Allen, Robert Allen Law. We co-hosted a venue there which gives sanctuary to our members. It gives them a place to get Wi-Fi, take a cool drink, have a meeting with a client. You can, it's a place that if you don't have a booth, you've got a place to go. So we've done that again this year at the Monaco Yacht Show. We'll have a place right on Rue de la Piscine. See how I said that, Bob? I'm catching on. We have a place right there on the outskirts of the show for our members to come and have a sanctuary where you can take meetings, take meals, get Wi-Fi, do your emails, have a quiet place to take a phone call, cool your heels for a little bit. So with the response that we've gotten from some of the community in Europe, we've actually been solicited by them to expand our presence there. And I'm not going to say that they've been knocking our door down. We feel like it's a great idea. There are influential members of the yacht brokerage community in Europe that seem to think that it's a very good idea as well. So what the board has tasked me to do is to explore the opportunities in Europe. So I'm going to go over there in July. I'm going to meet with a gentleman who's got a very broad reach in Europe. Some of you may know him. His name is Hein Velleman. He was, I think he was director at Fedship, Bob, wasn't he? He was director. He knows everybody in Europe. He's like the Bob Saxon of Europe, if you can even imagine that, if you could wrap your head around that concept. But Hein's very, very influential over there. He's very well known. He's assembled a group of guys for me to meet with in July. And what we're going to do is we're going to roll out IYBA Europe in September at the Monaco Yacht Show. We expect that what that's going to do is it's going to give us an opportunity to have a membership contingent in Europe. It's going to give us a more level playing field. It's going to promote cooperation and professionalism amongst the two communities. And when I started doing yacht brokerage, the idea of doing a deal in Europe was a, excuse me, it was a foreign concept. It was like, that's bizarre, that'll never happen. Today, it's a matter of course. Now, of course, in the big boat deals, it's very, very normal. But even in smaller boat deals, smaller boat, 40, 50, 60, 80 feet, it's a more common occurrence. So we feel like we've developed a really solid way of doing business here in the United States with our forms, with our code of ethics. We help raise the bar on a daily basis with our ability to educate. Oh, okay, sorry. What we're trying to do is to, a rising tide raises all ships. So what we want to do is to embrace the opportunity to do business with our partners in Europe, and it'll enhance our ability to do business and enhance their ability to do business. So you'll see more updates on that. If you're coming to Monaco, please come and see us. We'll be at Jack's Restaurant right on Rue de la Piscine, and there will be an event. This will be done as a revenue neutral or revenue positive move for the association. It will not be something that the U.S. Portion pays for the European portion. They'll support themselves through sponsorship, education, and events. So that's the status with what's going on with the association right now, the legislative update, and a couple of other quick things. As I mentioned, Jeff Parton, Cindy, Shay, Dined, and Michelle, excellent job. Thank you very, very much for a phenomenal presentation. A really great day, a lot of great information to take away. Our sponsors, Robert Allen Law, Tommy Gresham, Celadinas, Yacht World, Westport, and Howard Reeder. Without y'all, we couldn't make this happen. It costs us money to run these seminars, and the only way we can make up for that deficit is for the great help from folks like our sponsors. Thank you very much to all of you as well. I've had the pleasure of doing the closing remarks here a couple times, and a couple of the seminars, the yacht engineering seminars, you all know, is kind of my baby. I like building that one and putting the whole thing together. And every single year, every single seminar, with the exception of this year's yacht engineering seminar, we've had a guy who has stepped up to the plate, he'd answered the call, and he's done whatever needed to be done to help us get through this stuff. We have a master of ceremonies that's greatly in demand. He does a super, super job for us. Bob Saxon has done a phenomenal job time after time after time, and I always don't remember to call until I'm on 95 to call him and thank him. So thank you very much to Bob Saxon. I propose to the board that we give Bob a $10,000 gift certificate, a case of Silver Oak, and a weekend cruise on Cartouche in the Med. But yeah, well, Bob Zarkin voted that down, buddy. So a bottle of Silver Oak and a gift certificate to Capital Grille is a thank you very much. Cindy has it for you. I got you. And the last order of business, thank you very much, Bob, for a really, really great job time and time again. Thank you. Thanks, buddy. And the one other piece of business, please, before you get to cocktails, the pink sheets are what make these seminars great. It's how, when we build the next seminar, we take these pink sheets and we read every single one of them. We read every single comment, including, it seems like every time there's a guy who talks about what a stud the MC is. I don't know who that could possibly be. But anyway, please fill in your pink sheets. Please give us your honest comments. It's how we raise the bar and make these seminars better. Thank you again very much for coming. Thanks, brother.